From the PEP Radio newsroom, these are the stories we are covering at this hour. A long sliver of federal land along the U.S. Mexico border that President Donald Trump is turning over to the Department of Defense would be controlled by the Army as part of a base, which could allow troops to detain any trespassers, including migrants, U.S. officials told the Associated Press. The transfer of that border zone to military control and making it part of an Army installation is an attempt by the Trump administration to get around a federal law that prohibits U.S. troops from being used in domestic law enforcement on American soil. But if the troops are providing security for land that is part of an Army base, they can perform that function. However, at least one presidential powers expert said the move is likely to be challenged in the courts. The officials said the issue is still under review in the Pentagon, but even as any legal review goes on, the administration's intent is to have troops detain migrants at the border. The National Security Council did not respond to a request for comment. The land transfer is the furthest the Trump administration has gone yet to use the military for border security. Up until now, the military's involvement has been limited largely to helping build or fortify sections of the border wall and operating deportation flights to send migrants back to their home countries, or in some cases to the detention facility in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. The military also has assisted U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents by conducting surveillance or performing backup administrative tasks. The corridor, known as the Roosevelt Reservation, is a 60-foot wide federal buffer zone that ribbons along the border from New Mexico to California, except where it encounters tribal or privately owned land. It had been run by the Interior Department until Trump directed control be transferred to the Defense Department in a presidential memo released Friday night. For the next 45 days, the Defense Department will test taking control of a section of the Roosevelt Reservation in New Mexico east of Fort Huachaca, which is an Army installation in Arizona, one of the U.S. officials said. During that period, the Army will put up additional fencing and signs warning people not to trespass. In other news, President Donald Trump on Monday reiterated that he'd like to send U.S. citizens who commit violent crimes to prison in El Salvador, telling that country's president, Nayib Bukele, that he'd have to build 5 more places to hold the potential new arrivals. That's roughly what Hitler told Adolf Eichmann during World War II at the Wannsee Conference, or directed his officials at the Wannsee Conference to be aware of as they were making preparations for the final solution. Trump's administration has already deported immigrants to El Salvador's notorious mega prison CICAT, known for its harsh conditions. The president has also said his administration is trying to find legal ways to ship U.S. citizens there, too. Trump on Monday insisted these would be just violent people, implying they would be those already convicted of crimes in the United States, though he's also floated it as a punishment for those who attacked Tesla dealerships to protest his administration and its patron, billionaire Elon Musk. But it would likely be a violation of the U.S. Constitution for his administration to send any native-born citizen forcibly into an overseas prison. Indeed, it would likely even violate a provision of a law Trump himself signed during his first term. Here's a look at the notion of sending U.S. citizens to prison in a foreign country, why it's likely not legal, and some possible legal loopholes. Immigrants can be deported from the United States, while citizens cannot. Deportation is covered by immigration law, which does not apply to U.S. citizens. Part of being a citizen means you cannot be forcibly sent to another country. Immigrants can be removed, and that's what's been happening in El Salvador. The country is taking both its own citizens that the United States is sending, as well as those from Venezuela and potentially other countries that will not take their own citizens back from the U.S. The Venezuelans sent there last month had no opportunity to respond to evidence against them or appear before a judge. That's the deal the Trump administration signed with Bukele. The U.S. has sent people to El Salvador, Costa Rica, Panama, and elsewhere, even when they are not citizens of those countries. But under international agreements, people cannot be sent to countries where they are likely to be persecuted or tortured. Bukele calls himself the world's coolest dictator and has cracked down on human rights during his administration. He's also turned El Salvador from one of the world's most violent countries into a fairly safe one. Trump has embraced that example, including during the Oval Office visit Monday. Well, of course it's safe. He doesn't have anybody speaking out against him because they're afraid they're going to end up at CCOT. Sending immigrants from countries like Venezuela to El Salvador sends a message to would-be migrants elsewhere about the risks of trying to make it to or stay in the United States. Imagine if that happened back in 1620 at Plymouth Rock, or down in Virginia, or any of the other colonies of the Crown. There's a second benefit to the administration. People sent to El Salvador are outside of the jurisdiction of United States courts. Judges, the administration argues, can't order someone sent to El Salvador to be released or shipped back to the United States because the U.S. government no longer has control of them. It's a potential legal loophole that led the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor to issue a grim warning in her opinion in a 9-0 U.S. Supreme Court finding that the administration could not fly alleged Venezuelan gang members to El Salvador with no court hearing, even after Trump invoked an 18th century law last used during World War II to claim wartime powers. That's the news at this hour, and as grim as it is, eventually the regime will come to an end, I hope. If you are watching the news via YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the PEP Radio channel. And now, back to more music on PEP Radio.